Welcome back. Rising interest rates are designed to cool borrowing as the price of it rises, and housing is front and center in that process. Canada's housing regulator, CMHC, did the math on what it thinks rising rates will do to the real estate market. Here's a look by the numbers. First, CMHC thinks a higher rate scenario is one that's above 2.5%. In other words, we are there since the bank raised to that level this week. Here, CMHC assumes rates hit 3.5% early next year before moderating back to 2.5% as inflation cools back to the targets. But the higher rate scenario also comes with slower economic growth, 3.4% in 2022 and just 0.7% in 2023 as the rate hikes take hold. That slowdown could send unemployment back to 7% by early 2023 from its current all-time low of 4.9%. What CMHC doesn't see is a massive decline in home prices. Even with higher rates and slower growth, it sees prices declining just 5% by mid-next year. And even with declines, CMHC sees the pricing of homes staying high enough to encourage more building. Housing starts will stay at a more than 250,000 per quarter level. Taken together, you might call CMHC's forecast a rosy one, but it does allow for some risks to the outlook and things that could go wrong. Bob Dugan is chief economist at CMHC. Great to have you with us, Bob.
My pleasure to be here.
So we do have rates, and it's clear from our central bank that they sort of wanted to shock and say we're serious about this. We may get another full percentage point. So we could get to that 3.5% target pretty fast on the higher rate scenario side. Tell me why you think home prices hold up in that scenario, why we only see a 5% decline.
Well, now a 5% decline is pretty significant. And, you've got to be careful to sort of not get, when you think about average prices, they've come down much more than that already. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because of the changing mix of homes that are being sold. So fewer single homes, more condos, and that decreases the average price, but no one buys that changing mix of homes. So our forecast is mainly to look at house price inflation going forward, which abstracts from those compositional effects and is just the change in what house prices will do. And when you look so far, there's been about a 1.8% decline in house prices from February to March when you abstract from those compositional changes, which is much less than the 11% decline than we've seen in average prices. So what we're trying to talk about is more that house price inflation number. So that's still significant, but to answer your question is, we've always thought that housing supply in Canada has been too low and unresponsive to demand. And so we're going to have less excess demand as interest rates go up, but I still think that excess demand is going to return, and it's going to put a bit of a floor on how much house prices come down. Mm-hmm. And I think over the longer term, we still have an affordability problem because of the lack of supply.
And of course, one place that shows up is our preoccupation with the single-family home. And I say preoccupation because that's where we've seen sort of the real inflationary pressures happen in some of the hottest markets, but also a lack of kind of affordable renting showing up, multifamily dwellings showing up. Do you expect to see more of those built as we say, prices will stay strong enough that it'll keep developers at the table? That's the good news. Will they build the right stuff?
Well, that's certainly the hope, and we're certainly seeing that if you look at the rental market, there's all kinds of evidence now that rents are going up. We're seeing a lot of pressure, and that should probably increase because as interest rates go up, of course, those higher income renters that aspire to home ownership won't be able to make that move because interest rates are making it harder to qualify. So more people are going to stay in the rental market. We've got strong immigration levels in the years ahead, which will add rental demand, and that's going to drive up rents even further, I'm afraid. So I think that those higher rents should attract more investment, and hopefully we'll see a lot more construction. Mm-hmm. The problem is it takes time. You can't just put up a rental building in 6 months. It can take many years through the approvals and the construction to get that ready to occupy. So it really is a problem that we really have to tackle because affordability is really deteriorating.
It really is. And so with just seconds here, we've focused on young people and their ability to get into the housing market or into the real estate market. Do you see that improving when you're asked? I'm sure you are. Is this all going to make that worse, or will it actually help it?
Well, with the forecast you're seeing here, I heard you characterize the housing starts at 250-ish thousand housing starts. It's just not enough to get the job done. We almost need to see twice that to build the kind of supply we need to restore affordability, and that's a tall order. And so it's going to be very difficult. And you know, with this forecast, we don't see enough supply to restore affordability when we're going to have to find a way.
Bob, so good to have you with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bob Dugan is chief economist at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Well, central to any conversation about housing is affordability, and the rental market is one place where that lack of supply causes pricing pressure. In BC, a cap on even inflation-adjusted rent is being considered. That would protect tenants from massive spikes in rent, something that apartment owners say is unfair. They are also grappling with inflation. John Dickey is president of the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations. John, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So rent caps are often seen, John, as a kind of a help for the vulnerable, that it will, create affordability. Where do rent caps send us down the wrong path? What don't you like about them?
Well, they cause rental supply to decline. Small landlords move out of the market. Larger landlords don't develop. They allow people to retain larger apartments than they would otherwise occupy, and rent controls tend to discourage good maintenance and upkeep and improvements of rental buildings. So as a result, you have less availability and less quality of rental supply.
The suggestion in BC is that if they allow, which the current deal is that the adjustment can be for inflation, which will be a big sticker shock for a lot of people this year when it happens. And the idea is we won't make you go through that. What's the argument in favor of it? In other words, could you maybe meet in the middle or make it inflation averaged over several years? Is there a better way to kind of meet the needs of the owners, the landlords, but also not force people out of homes because of that big jump in their rent?
Well, most people receive increases in their income fairly closely following on inflation. And vulnerable people certainly are usually in that position because the provinces increase social assistance rates, the old age pension increases with inflation. Most jobs, workers are able to gain increases in their pay. And certainly, until recently, we've seen a booming economy with people having good hours and thus good incomes. Canadians' incomes rose under the pandemic and became more equal under the pandemic, and yet various provinces, including BC, put on rent caps when really people as a whole didn't need rent caps. Individuals may have needed some assistance, but we would say, and I think 95% of economists would say, target the assistance to the people who specifically need it.
Not a ton of time, but is now a good time to be a landlord? You got rates going up, you got a possible recession down the road. John, are you worried about the supply actually dropping when what we need is more supply coming online?
I don't think it will be a question of the supply dropping, although the supply in the secondary market, the small landlord supply might fall. But the biggest thing is the interference with developments going forward. And certainly the prospect of rising rents encourages people to build, but that's muted when governments and all kinds of activists are suggesting that rents not be allowed to go up with inflation. And inflation then just pushes up our costs and makes it less attractive to develop.
John, great to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
John Dickey
Anytime.
is president of the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations. Coming up, it doesn't get more serious for healthcare than a hospital forced to close its doors for lack of staff. We'll talk to the CEO of one hospital which did just that this week. Stay with us.